I've been reading and how it kind of relates to modern times, as the book actually talks about that itself. But it's called Byzantium, the Empire of God under Heraclius and Constantine the Fourth, and how the downfall can teach the less or teach lessons to the West. Um, okay, so the big concept of the book is Byzantium, Rome, being at war with Islam, like in general. So, if you don't know, Islam didn't start until like the early 600s. Um, but like as soon as the religion appeared, not only did Muhammad essentially make Constantinople the prize by saying that whoever conquers it would um, benefit greatly, or like he called the city the Red Apple. Um, as was proven historically, many caliphs and sultans would try and try and try again to conquer Constantinople up until, eventually it happened because the empire was basically shattered and non-existent. But before all that happened, when it first showed up, Islam that is, it was not necessarily this great power that people thought it would be. Because you see, at the time, there's two great powers. You have in the east the Persian Sasanian Empire, and then the west you had the Byzantine Empire, which is again the Eastern Roman Empire. So for most of the time that it's been fighting the Sassanids, it's also been dealing with other issues like barbarians in the west, Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths, Slavs, Bulgars, Avars, constantly being attacked, constantly under warfare, constantly with internal division too, with all these heretical uprisings and terrible rulers that just sprang up out of nowhere. But all this comes to a head with Heraclius. And Heraclius is basically able to be called the first crusader because he drove the armies of Rome, notably the last legions in existence, into the Persian heartland. And over a 30-year period of war, essentially, non-stop war, he was able to wrestle back the crumbling and faded empire from the brink of death, dealing a killing blow, actually, to the Sassanid Empire. Because even though these two empires were both like at their heights and at their like maximum capacity for uh, I guess administration, conquest, and military power, they were still both really strong. So it took him a long time to do this, but after he did it, it eventually started fracturing. There's a civil war between a bunch of nobles and successors for the caliph, or not the caliph, sorry, the Shah, um, which was, I believe, Khosrow the second at the time. Uh, most evil um, Sassanid Shah, I would say. Very, very much fun was gained by him by torturing, killing, and enslaving people, especially nuns. Very, sadistic. But what do you expect from a evil faith? Zoroastrianism is a essentially evil idea and religion. So anyway, but yeah, after these two empires are basically slogged it out and are both on death's door, um, the Arabs are like, "Oh, that's awesome. We just plan to expand, and our religion basically tells us that if we do not expand, we're not pious." Um, at least that's how Muhammad taught us. I can't get into that too much because otherwise I'll get like banned or whatever. But um, they attack the Persians, who are notably the worst off state at this time. Um, and this leads to a defeat uh, multiple times, and the Sassanids and the Byzantines, sorry, the Romans, noticing the inerrant condition, they're like, oh, we should totally join together. So they decide that they're going to join together in a location in, I want to say, modern day Palestine, Syria area, um, called Yarmouk. And so this is where the major um, globe changing battle takes place. The Battle of Yarmouk um, is a supposed coalition of the Romans and the Persians against the Arab tribes. Now, the Romans are already on the battlefield. They're, you know, sussing out the enemy, and they're waiting for days, you know, engaging in little conflicts, skirmishes, and the Persians are supposed to be showing up, but they never show up. After waiting for a enormously long time, Heraclius is like, they're not showing up. We are gonna lose. We are superiorly outnumbered. And so he tries to pull off the battle, but obviously the battle is not even able to be salvaged because he's vastly outnumbered. He has no uh, reinforcement, no ally, and so it just turns into a rout. The Roman army shatters against the cavalry of these Arab tribes, and this breaks the way for Muslim expansion into the Western world. The Western world at this time could be considered basically just the Mediterranean and anything that Rome is a part of. Because without Rome, there would be no civilization in Europe, and without European civilization, there would be no such thing as like the Western world as we know it. So like America, the Anglosphere, all that good stuff, or all that liberty-inducing stuff, yeah, wouldn't exist. So yeah, anyway, the Byzantines, the Romans, lose Assyria, Palestine, Mesopotamia. Eventually, they would also lose Egypt and then fall back into the mountains of Anatolia to defend. From here on out, the Muslims would batter themselves against the mountainous terrain and the walls of Constantinople countless times over and over and over through history. A total of, I believe, 9 sieges occurred of Constantinople by Muslim armies until, 1453, it was conquered. Actually, that was a few days ago, May 28th. No, May 29th, 1453. And so, to pivot back to my original thought, though, the Muslims would, because of this conquest of the Roman provinces, be able to spread westwards towards the Iberian Peninsula. The Roman army was, though well reduced, the only apparatus that was able to counter or abate the incursion of such an evil force. The Visigoths in Spain, in Iberia, rather, could not hold. They were shattered almost instantly. Uh, you know, the Ostrogoths or Lombards in Italy lost countless times, uh, lots of naval battles. They lost Sicilian island. I mean, the Romans were also losing the Sicilian island, but you know, they still had Islam, just like Italy, and it's like, oh, you're losing to these guys. You basically can't do anything. They literally got to Rome and then just left because they didn't have the time to attack Rome. The Franks, they invaded into Francia. They got up through Aquitaine up to um, around Petit. Let's see, Armor, close to there, I guess. I think they were really just contained to the Aquitaine Gascony area, though, as one of the important figures in England, Charles Martel, was able to beat them back. Although that was a very lucky case, as these Muslim armies were essentially just a scouting party from the Andalusian, what was soon to be called Andalusian area. Iberia was basically just being like consolidated and plundered by the Muslim armies, and so they didn't really have the focus or energy to go past the Pyrenees too much. Uh, but the Franks didn't really have a cohesive army. They were very decentralized. They very much were based on a feudal vassalage system, and so without loyalty to the king, or if there was no loyalty to the king, then they wouldn't follow the king. Why would they? It was about personal relations within the Germanic systems. It was not about civilizational or um, hierarchical authority. There is no such concept of that within Germanic civilizations. Germanic civilizations within this time period were all based on oh, strong warrior, follow him, loyal, or family, loyal. Whereas in like the Roman system, it was I am loyal to my civilization and my state because they produce loyalty in me by, XYZ. They provide food or like entertainment or education or welfare, just like whatever. It was a actual civilization, not just a tribe. You understand how a civilization works, so you live in one. But yeah, so there's that. And then essentially all that leaves for the ability for Europe to have civilization is the Romans. So had these things played out as they did, Rome would not have stood as long as it did. Obviously, it would have fallen a lot earlier, and Muslim expansion would have happened into Europe. Now, right now, we see in the world a similar issue. So, first, let me go over the important detail of the last Sassanid Roman War. It basically exhausted and destroyed the two empires. Like, they were brought to their not only financial and military stress and point, but just to like the civilizational breaking point. They reached it. Um, in layman's terms, their war became a status quo antebellum, which means they returned to the conditions previous to the war. They lost in total almost 500,000 people just to return to status quo with no changes. Now, although the Cold War was different in the fact that we didn't directly fight with the Soviets, the U.S. Soviets being, it was still very much this concept of a civilizational empire break-in situation, which of course we saw that happen after the Soviet Union's collapse. It got invaded, much like how the Sassanid Empire got invaded by Arabs. The fallen Soviet Union, which became the Russian Federation, got invaded by Westerns. Westerners tried to capitalize in uh, Western nation, which it's not a culture, no people that can have that kind of system in place. It's not, modern Westernization is basically just um, global homoization, secularization, destruction of family unit, of religion, of, you know, tradition, all that stuff. Because the modern Western machine is just monetary based. Oh, this can provide me money at the price of my people. Oh, well, it provides me money, so I'll do it. That's basically how like the system works. Because you have like these corporations that run everything. You have governments uh, that are being like abused by the system of uh, money. You have people who are bought and sold, even though they're supposed to be elected. You have people who govern with completely different standards based on the populace, like, two-tier system in Britain. technically there's a two-tier system in the U.S. as well with like mm, migrants. Let's put it that way. Versus citizens. Um, and yeah, but this is the surviving empire, though it's almost shattered and is on the decline. It is in this historical perspective, the Roman identity of the last Roman-Sasanian war. So, what's going to happen though? Well, it wasn't instantly, technically, that um, the Arabs invaded Persia and invaded the Roman Empire. It was about 20 years after this conflict occurred that they decided to spring out of Arabia. And similarly, roughly 20 years after the downfall of, well, I guess it was technically less, but after the downfall of the Soviet Union, what did we find ourselves in with the US? Conflict with the Muslim world, constantly fighting in areas that we had no longer the ability to sustain any force within, just like the Romans within the Syria-Palestine area. We have no ability to maintain a hegemonic or military influence or power within the Middle East, which we thought we had. The only reason I think that uh, something like the invasion of Iraq happened as well as it did was because we had the coalition of like the world against Iraq. But again, that was devastating to our affairs as well as Afghanistan, Yemen, all these things. You know about. And once more, the Roman army was shattered by these Muslims, and that is kind of what happened here with us. We are shattered in Afghanistan. We left literally an entire military bases worth of supplies for them to take. You know, we were shattered by the Yemenis. Oh, we made a personal deal with them. They won't attack American forces anymore. Uh, so our mission, which we were over there for, was a failure then, essentially. Sure, we protected American interests, but that was not our mission, really. So we failed the mission there. We lost countless supplies, spent countless resources, and it all failed. We're essentially having to pull out of our overseas, what you could call it, interests or influences, which technically you could consider the Levant overseas interests for the Roman Empire at that time. And after that, for them, it was just a backpedaling of territory and finance and manpower, everything just down the drain. And that is kind of what's happening. The economy is only getting worse. Recruitment rates are plummeting more so. Sure, there's a little bump because of the new president, but I mean, ultimately, it's never going to go back up to a foreseeable success rate. And overall, we're very much in a position where we're having foreign peoples invading. It might be a soft invasion within the US specifically, like not a war, but in Europe, you have lots of populaces of foreign Muslims replacing and, establishing themselves within these countries. Britain, France, Germany, you know, Italy, Austria, Spain, like all across Europe, all across most of the western half of Europe. But and it's totally destroying them. And our immigration issue is totally going to destroy us too. The Romans couldn't survive it. Why should we be able to? the advent of technology has no difference making on the will of people. The will of people cannot be squashed simply by inventing new entertainment or by having different people in power. The will of people can only be influenced by the state, and when the state does nothing to influence it, it won't matter. When the state does nothing to defend it, it doesn't matter. So just like the West, how it became overrun by barbarians, Germanic tribes in Roman times, and then eventually, uh, you know, other civilizations sprung out of that. Europe in the West is being overrun this time by Muslims, and a new civilization will come out of that. One that is not a European civilization, one that is not a freedom, liberty based situation. I don't really care about democracy, but freedom and liberty are pretty important aspects of European civilization. So, yeah, we find ourselves at a historical perspective of the outcome of the Battle of Yarmouk. We are in decline, and it is going to start worsening and worsening even more than it already has. Yeah, this was just a little short expose that I wanted to discuss, even if it was a little jumbled, whatever. From now on, I'm gonna just talk about like things that I read or like things I find interesting. Essentially, uh, avoid space of me just talking about things I find interesting or that are important. So that's all.